Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo. Here in the frozen north, I've been thinking about the animals I want and all the animals you guys suggested, and this is what I've come up with. Each one of these wooden boxes represents a habitat, and as you can see, there are a lot of them. In today's episode, we're going to be here building an Arctic town, which is going to be the central hub for our guests before they head out into the wild. Let's go! Before we start building the town, there's one thing I want to take care of, and that's donation bins. So normally I just colour them to fit the area, but for this area I want to cover them up completely to make things more realistic. So we're going to build a donation bin cover. We're going to make it out of wood so it goes nicely with the theming of the rest of the area. We're going to make a circular structure so it looks more like the sort of donation bins that you'll occasionally see in zoos. They're kind of antiquated these days. You'd expect to be paying electronically rather than with cash or cheque. But we need something to cover these up with, so this is what we're going to do. So we're going to rotate some wood until we've got something that's the right size to cover up the donation bins. We're using the mud pillar piece so that we can get it in a perfect circle like so. And then we'll cover up the top of it with a barrel, and then just make some adjustments to some of the other pieces so it looks better. And then we're going to put one of the memorial signs on, get it up the right way. And we've just got a little bit of blurb there about some mythical Arctic foundation that you're donating to, and then we'll use a couple of brackets to make the slot where you'd put your cash in. With this being franchise mode, we have to have donation bins everywhere, and I really want to go the extra mile and get things looking a lot more realistic. This is the sort of attention to detail that I want to follow throughout this area, just to try and make it the best area in the zoo. You can see one outside the Caribou Creek here. That looks so much better than the donation bin. Let's move on now and start building our little Alaskan town. We've got this Inukshuk garden here that we already built, and behind that is where the town is going to go. We're going to start today with 4 buildings, all taken from Nome in Alaska, a kiosk and some scenery as well. We've got a lot to get done. Thanks for all your comments on these facades in the last episode, by the way. The consensus is that these facades were built simply to make the buildings look more impressive. A lot of these Alaskan towns and a lot of the frontier towns in America were thrown together very quickly, so that the poor quality of the buildings themselves were disguised by putting big impressive facades on the front so that the main street looked a bit more like a more traditional and more expensive American main street. This first building is an amalgam of 2 different buildings that I've seen, which was, I think, a saloon with a little sort of food place next to it, and we're going to turn them into a gift shop and a bar/drinks place. We're also going to explore a lot of different colours on these buildings, but first it's time for Franchise Masters. We use a lot of custom fonts in this zoo, and because they're made by various different very talented individuals rather than Frontier, they can all work in slightly different ways, and they're a little bit confusing the first time you try and use them. So I thought I'd show you one of them and we'll go through how they work. So this particular font from the amazing Ricey just has one massive group with everything in it, so you need to select the letters manually like this. The most important thing to do when you're using them is when you move each letter into place, you switch from the relative axis to the world axis, and that'll keep them all on the same plane and make sure they all line up nicely. Some of the fonts have each letter as a different group, which makes it even easier. But the way I like to do it is to keep the backing of the font in, the sort of concrete or plaster pieces that you normally find at the back, and make sure all the letters are perfectly lined up on that, and then delete everything and you can start moving it into the position where you actually want the font. If you want to get hold of the fonts that we use in this zoo, then just go to the Steam Workshop and search for ZSH Plays, go to my profile and go to Collections, and you will find my font collection. I'm pretty sure every font that we use in this zoo is in there. All the ones we've used so far were made by Ricey, Christina and Wyatt Andrews Workshop, I think. There's a few other really good fonts in there that I've used in other zoos, and pretty much all your font needs can be catered for by going to that group. Once you've got the font in the place that you want it, then we'll just line it up, make sure it's nicely centered, start thinking about a color. This one is flexi-color, most of them are. You need to change both the colors on this particular font. Another tip, if you want things to be white, don't actually make them white, make them a light gray, maybe with a tiny little bit of yellow mixed in. It just gives a less overly bright color that will, certainly on a realistic sign like this, going to make it look a lot more realistic. Apologies for the pun in the name, but the original saloon was called the Bearing Saloon, and Bearing Gifts was just too good not to use. Anyway, hope that was useful. Let's get back to the build. So we need to do the inside of the gift shop now, and I'm going to go with quite an Alaskan vibe to fit the outside of it. We're not going to use an actual gift shop because I'm not sure we're going to have enough people this far into the zoo to get any use out of it. We've already built one gift shop, so we're going to race through this pretty quickly, using all the new souvenir pieces to decorate it so we can get it looking like this. I've got some pieces from Ricey's gift shop pack in here, as well as the in-game pieces. And then we're going to do some work on the back wall, get a big rack of t-shirts and tote bags up here, so it looks like people have got loads of things to choose from. I'm trying to pick the t-shirts that are more generic and less Planet Zoo-y. I've got that one white t-shirt in there because you can't really see what it says from the main part of the gift shop, and I like the look of it. We'll stick with the animals for the most part. We'll put some statues and things like that on these little counters that we've built for where the staff are going to go. Put some animal masks up on these beams just to add a splash of colour up there, trying to get this very tall building sort of filled from bottom to top, so there's a lot to look at. And then I want some traditional style kind of antlers or deer heads sticking out of the wall. Now we've got this reindeer statue which is perfect for that, except that the back half of it is going to be inside the shop, so we'll need to deal with that in a second. What we're going to do is spin this round, much like we did way back when we built the entrance. We're going to have this so that its head is poking out of the wall, and if we can get the angles and the position right, it's going to look like the traditional sort of deer decoration that you see in places like this. So that's it in, and then we'll cover up its rear half with another donation bin and some balloons, these red panda balloons here, and just keep building things in until you can't see the back end of the reindeer. Then we're going to use the back of this bark piece as the board that the head statue is on, and I think that looks pretty cool. Next up, we're going to put some more of Ricey's gift shop pieces in. These little lunch boxes are so cute, I love these, and you see a lot of stuff like this in zoos. That's really good. We'll put some final detailing into the roof so that the timbers going across are actually joined onto the roof and start making it look more realistic. We've got some netting hanging down as well just to fill up some more space, and then we'll move on to the next part of the building. This is going to be the bar. It's based on the little food place that was joined on to the original building back in 1901. And you can see I've introduced some colour into the main building, and we're going to carry that on here as well. That's really deep red, really like that. So we're going to build the whole of this little extension out of wood of that colour. So we can just copy this wood down here. It's a much smaller building, like a long, thin building, rather than the more impressive one next to it. We're going to use this little bar arrangement, which is a combination of a workshop item from Toves and a bar that I made for Penguin Cove. And we'll get this down both sides of the building. This is somewhere I imagine adults can come in for a beer or an alcoholic beverage of some kind, and the kids can have a milkshake or whatever. And then we're going to make the bar. This is based on the counter that we use throughout this zoo, but I want to make this one a bit more special. And these pieces from the barnyard pack, the metal planters, are going to make a really, really interesting bar. You see a lot of sort of polished metal like this in classy bars, and San Bernardino Zoo is a classy place, so we're going to have a classy bar. We'll use these to make the bottom of the bar, and with these uplighters I've put on the floor, you get a really nice shine on it. It looks really cool. I find I'm using quite a lot of pieces from the barnyard pack throughout this build. The really sort of old school, rustic, American style farm fits in pretty nicely with early 20th century Alaskan buildings as well. That's the bar done. Now some more font work for the sign. This is the actual name of the old building there, the sideboard, which is a cute little name considering I think it served food, and it is basically attached to the side of a larger building. So we will copy this, get this onto the front of the building, and then we're going to swap the S out for one of the normal font S's because it's larger, just makes the sign a bit more interesting. And we use some of the European neon signs as well to get a bit of a design going on the front. Now, one of the key features of these kind of towns is that the buildings were always up on steps. I think because the main streets were just like mud, so I think they had like steps and sidewalks in that were raised so that the buildings were kept cleaner. So we're going to do that. We're going to drop in another building. This was originally built as a staff building. We're going to use this as a little implied education centre with a nice little colour change. And then I saw some huge telegraph poles in the reference images I was looking at. They were really tall. I couldn't see any wires either. I'm not sure if that was just due to the old school nature of the photo or whether they hadn't been put in yet, but we're just going to have these huge telegraph poles towering over the town. I think that looks really imposing. And then it's on to possibly my favourite part of the build, a fry bread stand. I had never heard of fry bread until I did my research for this episode, but apparently it is big in Alaska. Obviously, I've seen and eaten breads like this before, just not in this exact format and with this name. It is essentially, as the name would suggest, some fried dough which can be served either savoury or sweet. I think we'll go with the sweet option in San Bernardino. So we've got the pizza counter here. We're going to turn this pizza into some fry bread, just using font pieces, get them to the right colour, and then we're going to cover all the sort of cheese, tomato, mushroomy parts of this pizza with this, so we can get more of a just a bread kind of look to it. I'm not sure how it will stand up to close inspection, but it looks pretty decent from back here. And we can just copy this down on top of all the others till we've got ourselves a nice little pile of flatbread. This is the souvenir stand, of course, that we built last week. So we're going to rip all the souvenir stuff out of it and put in a fryer and a fridge and all the stuff that we need to make our fry breads. So we're going to use this air conditioning as the first part of the fryer. We'll get one of these and then we'll get another one next to it. So we've got 2 fryers, we can get 2 fry breads done at once. We'll put a little grill in here as well, just to add to the effect. And then we'll get some of the aluminium or aluminum pieces, depending on whereabouts in the world you are, and use this to build the side of the fryer. While I finish that off, let's talk about a real zoo for a second. I have just finished editing the footage for the Tiergarten Schönbrunn tour. That just needs a voiceover, and then I'll be able to get that video released. So that should be on the channel fairly soon, and we can take a look at the oldest zoo in the world. Back in this zoo, we're going to put the frying plates. I think that's what it's called. I'm not a chef, but wherever they actually fry the bread, once the dough has been into the fryer, then they need to sort of squish it down and turn it into a fry bread. I believe that's the technical term for it. And then we're just going to take one of the little bits of sort of batter that we created and put that on top of the oven. We've got some smoke in there as well. That's going to sell the fact that we've got some cooking going on here. So we've got the batter pretty much where we want it now. And then we can move on and get onto the fridge. Before that, we'll drop a few plates in on the front. And then we need a spatula or something like that so they can actually work with the bread, and then we'll get the fridge done. So we're going to use those aluminium pieces again, and then I'll get one of the grasslands poles in to make like a door in the middle of it, and then we'll use some more metal pieces to get a top on there to cover up the bottom of these bottles on that really weird shelf that they stick through. And then we've got this piece. I don't think I've ever used this piece before. It's actually really useful. This just sort of block of metal. You can use this to add some detail to the top of it, make it look a bit more interesting. And then we'll put some handles on, and finally a backboard for the fryer to keep things nice and clean. And there we go, we've got our own little Frontier fry bread stand. Another thing I saw in the reference photos was just a big old pile of gravel and rocks. I was wondering if it would be possible to make that without using mods. So by raising the terrain, smoothing it down, we can actually get some gravel pathing in a circle on top of this hill here. I wasn't sure this was going to work, but it does, which is cool. The key is to make sure that the terrain has been smoothed enough. And then we're going to cover it in loads of the faux rocks, all randomly rotated, and then select them all and just drop them down so they're just poking through the gravel. We end up with a pretty realistic gravel pile, I like that. And then we can move on to the final thing that we're going to build today, a bear trap. Not that kind of bear trap, but don't worry. This is an ethical bear trap, which I saw in a zoo somewhere in the States. I can't remember which zoo it was, but basically the residents of Manitoba, I think it's pronounced, in Canada. Apologies to any Canadian viewers if I've massacred the pronunciation there. They suffer with polar bears coming in to town during the months when there's not a lot of food for them. And much as I presume you love polar bears, they're not something you want to meet when you're walking down the street, especially if they're particularly hungry. So they have these traps set up which capture the polar bears humanely, and then they move them to a holding pen until the food stocks have improved for the polar bears, and then they are released back into the wild where they can happily go about hunting seals, etc., and nobody gets eaten. I thought that was a really cool thing to have in the zoo, so we're going to make a replica of that and have that as a piece of scenery in the town here. The whole concept of this town is it's sort of an oasis in the middle of the wild, so as soon as the guests leave this little town where they can get food, drink, fry bread, watch educational films, etc., then they're going to be heading into the wild to see some of the more impressive animals that we have here. So after the caribou, we're going to have the more impressive animals coming up. And this polar bear trap should act as a reminder that bigger things are coming. That's where it's going to sit, and that's the town pretty much done. Let's take a look at it. I think this is going to provide a really nice tranquil spot for people before they head off into the wild to see the rest of the animals. Here's the fry bread stand. I'm really pleased with this. Don't often do stuff like this on the channel. Here's the bar. I've gone for a really sort of classic feel with this one. And the polar bear trap. Really happy with how that turned out. We should probably let some guests in just for the cinematics. The town is called Stamford. That was a nice American town sounding name. We've got some more of the donation bin covers there. And here's the gift shop. We'll check it out inside. I have made it as cluttered as possible. I've thrown absolutely everything at it. I want to thank another creator for this as well, Robin Bird. I spoke to them a little bit about this gift shop and a few ideas thrown around to get it as cluttered and realistic as possible. So thanks for your help, Robin. Let's head up into the drone cam to take a look at where we started today. And this is where we are now. I made some adjustments to the garden in front of the buildings as well, just to make sure that everything felt like a tiny little town. And to the left and the right of it will be the path taking people into the wild to see the animals. Next week we're going to be adding our first carnivore into the frozen north. Very much looking forward to that. Take a quick look at the Explorers Club monolith. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and thank you to everyone who's joined. And I'll see you next week for some more Planet Zoo.